imagine an all boys club which is a tad bit more inclusive, a tad bit more diverse, and a tad bit more creative. Well, to have all that and much more, it has to have the Midas touch of a supportive female leader. When women uplift women, a magical and organic change of dynamics is observed in households, communities, boardrooms, and countries.
The Winning Side, a series of dialogues about winning themes such as diversity and inclusion, creating social impact, and leading change.
Hello and welcome to the Winning Side Suite. This is your host, Sara Hasan, and today our dialogue is on a very interesting topic, and that is when women uplift women. I personally can't wait to explore the magic that networking brings forth. For those of you who do not know me, I was the former women's officer at University of Cambridge Graduate Union in 2019. And while holding that post, I realized that it is so important to have this ongoing support system for females, be it at an academic level, a personal level, or a professional level. We definitely need it. And I am absolutely excited to invite our esteemed guests today to discuss just that. At the Winning Side Suite, we invited two inspirational leaders today to have a constructive dialogue on supporting and uplifting female talent. Dr. Ghina Halabi and Peju Adebajo. Welcome on both.
Thank you, Sara. Pleasure to be here.
You're very welcome and thank you for joining us. I will start off with sharing a bit about your journey, although I'm sure your journey has much more to it, but just to give an overview to the audience. So Dr. Ghina is an astrophysicist. She's a former research scientist at the Institute of Astronomy. She's a social entrepreneur leading EnterpriseWOMEN at Cambridge Judge Business School Entrepreneurship Center. She's a mentor with United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs and sits on the advisory board for public engagement at Cambridge University. She's the founder and managing director of She Speaks Science, a social enterprise that gives women and minorities in STEM a platform to provide their work, make science accessible, and inspire the next generation of scientists with storytelling. Ghina is the first person to obtain a PhD in astrophysics from a Lebanese university, the American University of Beirut. She's a public speaker for global forums, including United Nations and TEDx, and a perfect candidate to talk about how women uplift women because she has been a mentor to me and two of my colleagues who are working on a startup initiative. So thank you, Ghina, for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Next up, we have Peju Adebajo. Peju is the CEO of Lumos Nigeria, a renewable energy company with a vision to power 1 million homes and businesses by 2025. Peju's career spans over plus 30 years. She's held senior executive positions and CEO positions for over 13 years. Prior to heading Lumos, Peju was appointed as the Honorable Commissioner for Agriculture for Ogun State Government. She has worked in C-suite and senior roles across a variety of sectors, an inspiration to many, both professionally and personally. Peju is a proud wife, a mother. She's passionate about transformation, one person, one business, one system at a time. She studied BSc and MSc in chemical engineering at Imperial and later gained her MBA at Harvard Business School. Well, if that's not enough, she's also a recipient of 2015 CNBS Africa Business Women of the Year Award and the 2013 Harvard Business School Nigeria Leadership Award. Well, thank you, Peju, for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here, Sara, and lovely to meet you again, Ghina. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Now that we have both of you on board, I think we'll start off by hearing more about your personal journey as a female leader in your field, because I think, just listening to your profiles and whatever little I know about you, it is very difficult to be the first person in your field to be paving the route or paving the road and then walking on it and then making sure others, have it easy or can follow the path that you've created. So what is your personal journey? What worked for you and what did not? So Peju, maybe we start with you, if that's okay.
Yes, I'm happy to. I think my journey is a little bit unusual, and I'll start with my family. I grew up in a family of 4 girls and a boy, and my parents didn't treat us any different. And so I grew up pretty ignorant of any supposed differences between the career path or journey of a male versus a female. I studied engineering, so I was also at the time, a very male-dominated college. I think there were 97 guys and 3 women. And so as I went into the workforce, I started off in the UK. I was always a double. I then discovered I was a double minority, but I would say the minority in terms of ethnic group was perhaps more of a factor than even being a female. However, as I rose up the ladder, I did notice that it was getting a bit more lonely. And in fact, all of my sponsors or mentors were men. And so I began, as you said, I began to look around me and realize that not everybody had my journey, and then began to consciously reach out to pull more women up the ladder, mentoring, both formally and informally, encouraging, forming female circles. And so I find that even though my personal experience has not been in any way negative, in any case, I think I simply don't notice as much. But I know it's not the same for many women. And I'm very glad that these days there's much more of affirmative action to ensure that even though normally at the beginning of the career journey, the ratio of male to female is usually equal or fair or close to equal. But by the time you get to the top, it could be less than 5%. So I think that affirmative action is necessary. And I certainly encourage it wherever I can. So in terms of being a female, I think the aspects of being female in terms of having a consensus style, a more collaborative style, have worked for me, not a confrontational style. And sometimes I find being female, people assume I'm not threatening, which is very nice. But that has worked for me. What doesn't work for me, simply because it's not my style, is to play any sort of feminine card. So I think I've had a bit of an unusual journey, but I think the world is changing, and I'm very keen to help accelerate the change. I have 3 daughters, and it's extremely important to me that they have strong female role models.
Totally. And perhaps, I'm not sure, but perhaps because the way you were brought up, you kind of did not see or did not care what was going around you. And sometimes that feeling makes you get going on the race and you don't care what's around you.
My mother worked, and she had a very successful career. So for me, it was completely normal. I know many of the sort of setting I was brought up in was a very professional, probably, slightly more educated setting. And so it was not unusual for me.
You had the right role models.
I had the right role models. But I think as I got into a workplace, a much more diverse workplace. And I should also say that I had 2 years in politics, actually. And I saw that in the political field, the discrimination against women is worse, far, far worse. And so I'm very conscious of the fact now that it's an issue that needs to be very urgently addressed. When you look at the leadership we have, at least in my country, one certainly feels that perhaps things would be better if there was more gender representation. And in any case, the statistics show that when you have women on boards, when you have women at the top, companies actually do better. So it makes good business sense to have more women in leadership positions.
Indeed. Ghina, your journey. Totally excited to hear about it.
Yes. Listening to Peju, I think I share with Peju this blessing of growing up in a family that also doesn't differentiate between a boy and a girl. I have two siblings, a sister and a brother, and also my family, my parents, encouraged me, just like my brother, to do what I really want to do in terms of becoming a scientist or a leader or a pioneer. They never gave me the impression that my gender would be an obstacle. To build on what Peju said, and I 100% agree with all that she said, I think my background as an astrophysicist, I realize it has put a different spin on my journey. It has informed my journey in so many different ways. And I think two ways stand out for me. One is perspective. We find ourselves sometimes struggling to hold our own, to find our next foothold. And we feel sometimes overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of what's going on in the world and the whole uncertainty, like wrapping our reality at the moment. But as an astrophysicist, I learned to take the long view, to step back from the current reality and try to put things in perspective. And I think that has informed me on my journey and helped me overcome obstacles and problems and barriers. And the second thing is agency. In astrophysics, you come across incredibly complex systems, unimaginably complex systems. But each part of this system plays its own role and affects the bigger system. And so knowing that and really living that through my research, I came to believe that no matter how small my role is, it does play part in a bigger ecosystem. And this informs my work today, whether leading She Speaks Science, promoting and celebrating women scientists and celebrating STEM and encouraging the youth to take up STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, and maths, or through my work on EnterpriseWOMEN, helping women businesswomen and founders and early CEOs to grow and scale their businesses. So I think these 2 points, which I've inherited from my own background, my research, really impacted my journey and how I see the world. Perspective and a strong sense of agency as a leader, as a change maker, or having this strong belief that, given the passion and the determination, I'm able to do it.
It's brilliant. Especially the part where you said that whatever your role is, it's important. While we talk about one's role in society or in the community, we currently stand in a place or in a world which recognizes the importance of gender diversity. United Nations Sustainable Development Goals 2030 included gender equality as one of the primary goals. And something that I quite liked about this report published by the UN was that titled Leave No One Behind. It reflected on shifting the needle on women's economic empowerment and highlighted on a very, very interesting point that nothing should be done for women without the women. So on that, if I were to ask you, Peju and Ghina both, what are the 3 key areas in your particular industry that needs to be addressed to facilitate women empowerment and support the gender dynamics? What would those 3 things be?
Okay, thank you, Sarah. So my industry is renewable energy. So put a little bit of context. renewable energy in Africa, 600 million people don't have access to the grid. In Nigeria, it's 85 million people out of a population of about 200 million. That's more than the population of the UK, certainly more than the population, more than the population of Germany, more than the population of many countries. Now, women tend to bear this burden disproportionately. And so energy poverty really has a female face in that women, when there's no power, no light from the grid, we tend to use alternative power like generators. And women are the ones who often have to go and either fetch firewood, if it's going to be firewood, or go to walk long distances to buy kerosene. Women are the ones who have to give birth in clinics with no light and sometimes lose their lives because the doctor's trying to give birth by candlelight or by torchlight. Women are the ones whose children are unable to do their homework and therefore are deprived of perhaps an education because they're unable to study at night. Women are the ones who have to bend over a hot stove, trying to cook, inhaling all sorts of poisonous fumes. So, women really do suffer disproportionately. On the converse, when you have energy or access to power, small businesses, which many of them tend to be manned by women, micro businesses with a mobile phone, which is charged, you could do a lot in terms of, giving women some sort of economic empowerment. So in my industry, one of the first areas is actually just to enable more women to be consumers, to have access to and be consumers of the products. Now, because we're talking about a product which, needs to be affordable, then having, for example, consumer finance, making the product available and having consumer finance or microfinance very often then gives that woman, and we know that when it comes to microfinance, women have a much stronger repayments record. And so targeting microfinance at women is a definite way of enabling those women to become consumers. So that's one, enabling women to be consumers. Another is just also enabling women to use this as a business. It's a very new industry in Africa. And by definition, most of people using this are early adopters. And it's a business whereby it's very much word of mouth. Now, in the communities, women tend to be those strong, have very strong social networks, those strong community pillars, the trusted friend, the trusted aunt, who can recommend a product to you, and you're likely to want to use it and buy it. And so we're also enabling women to become distributors or vendors of these products. And it works very well because they can leverage those community networks. And lastly, because it's a new industry, it's not a quote unquote male dominated industry. You don't have to shift anyone out of position to succeed. And so, so there's so many different roles in the value chain where we can actually encourage women to take on some of those roles, from the distributors I mentioned earlier on, to people who install the solar systems. There are many roles, and of course, not just the menial or blue collar roles, although that may be applicable at the grassroots level, but also ensuring that there is representation throughout the career ladder, as I alluded to earlier on. So I think in my industry, because it's a relatively new industry, we're fortunate in that we can actually shape and mold policies, and especially looking at the impact that renewable energy has at the grassroots level, where women are ultimately will be the bigger beneficiaries. Even in terms of domestic violence, you'll be amazed how just having access to light or safety, having light around the compound, electricity around the compound, enables women to inhabit a safer space. So my particular industry, I think, is very important that we have more availability of energy, and that will really have a huge effect on women's empowerment.
So you're actually enlarging the pie and creating new opportunities, which is wonderful.
There is scope for that.
Indeed. Ghina, and what about your side of the world?
Yes, what Peju has just said reminded me of a book I'm reading at the moment, actually. Focusing on what Peju said related to how women tend to suffer most in times like this. I'm reading currently a book called Pachinko by Min-Jin Lee. It's set in Japan. It's the story of 4 generations of Koreans through wartime and colonization, etc. And it was originally published in 2017. And one phrase that continuously appears in the novel is, "A woman's lot is to suffer." Because the story talks about how women suffer economically, trying to provide for their family, especially at times of war. Socially, with struggling with unwanted pregnancies and the social stigma around that, etc. So it just came to my mind, and I wanted to mention it. I think there are things that could help with women's economic empowerment. Every one of us has something to contribute, but if Sarah, if you asked me maybe a year ago, what are 3 key areas we need to address to facilitate women empowerment, I would have given you 3. But today I feel that it's more than that. This won't do anymore. We are beyond asking for a chance. For women empowerment to happen, we need to change the underlying paradigms. We need to challenge the systems, from how we do science to how we define and debate economics, and everything in between, including politics, including business, including entrepreneurship, including finance, including caring responsibilities, etc. These systems are flawed and they are designed without us. So I do not think the only way to liberate this potential of women is not trying to fit in. We know very well that, if a shoe doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. There's no point wobbling around and agonizing in a badly fitting stilettos. We need to create a new system, one that is built in partnership with the women. As long as that doesn't happen, you keep hearing things. I'll give you an example. Last Monday, an article came out in the Business Insider that has this title: NASA astronaut Megan MacArthur, whose husband just flew on SpaceX Crew Dragon, will pilot the spaceship in spring. They define her of who her husband is. The main highlight of the story is that her husband just flew on SpaceX Crew Dragon. Was her husband on her CV when she was selected? No, he wasn't. And, the story isn't that she is the wife of somebody. The story is that she will be the captain of that spaceship. Take the field of economics, for example. This is a perfect example because you see the women rattling the cage there as well, revolutionizing the field in terms of how even the simplest things, how we define debt and value and growth and GDP. And Peju will know probably more than me on this. I was reading the other day, Rebecca Henderson, an author and professor at Harvard Business School. She says, it's odd to finally make it to the inner circle and discover just how strangely the world is being run. So you see, to change things, really, we need to get to that inner circle and change it and change the system. You see the same in politics. It goes without saying how women leaders have handled the pandemic. But it's a very long and tedious journey. And I think if I am to think of 3 types of women who are leading this, call it revolution, yeah? If I want to think about it this way, key ways to change the system, I would first think of the A-listers, those who play the system and master its rules, the rules of the game, And we see many women in male-dominated fields doing marvelously, and Peju is one of them. The second group is the disruptors, and those who try to get to the top and then shake and rebuild that system. And the third type is the seekers. And I see those as the quiet characters who are kind of biding their time, and they will start to emerge once the system is more welcoming and accommodating. And I've known women of all three types. And I think this is how this tidal wave is to be led, by having the pioneers, by having the disruptors, and as well bringing along the people who probably are quieter or shy, and they need a more welcoming system. The A-listers are our role models, and you see them everywhere. The disruptors are our heroes, and the seekers are our hope for a better future, as generations, the younger generations grow and start leading themselves. And I think these three types will be, helping change the system, but also obviously with the man as an ally and co-leading this movement by just believing, like Peju said, on the importance of diversity on all aspects, on financial, so in terms of social justice, obviously, as well as, financial performance and returns.
The best part of that was, when you said that if a shoe doesn't fit, doesn't fit. And sometimes it gets so difficult to realize that you need something that fits. And around us, or I think in my prior generation, I see a lot of superwomen who are trying to do everything and trying to fit in the space. Little do they realize that they need to step back and create a new system that works best, rather than just trying to overdo and become these, although they are great role models, but they are superwomen, which is not sustainable for all. So
exactly. We need to bring in, that's the essence of diversity. We need to bring in the people who are more retired, who are more, the shy characters, and I see them everywhere. And as long as in academia, we see them most in academia. And yeah, you do need to bring them along as well, and you need to prepare the play field so that they feel welcome.
I must say, I really like what you said, Gina, about diversity. And when we talk about diversity, I think we tend to think along two main strata, if you like. We think about gender diversity a lot, and we think about ethnic diversity. But I think other types of diversity, like social diversity, and even diversity. So, for example, if you look at a typical board, many, and I may be generalizing, but you find that because people often tend to hire in their own image, you would find maybe some of the companies, at least let me say in Nigeria, many people have gone the route of maybe say being a CFO and a former CEO. But why don't we put a teacher on the board? Why don't we put so not just in terms of social diversity, not just the typical blue blood, white middle class type person who could be male, could be female, but has the same values, but put people with real diversity in terms of their social beliefs, real diversity in terms of profession. And I think only that way, when we begin to get more representative of what society looks like, will we begin to get change. So it's so easy. I mean, I see it all the time. People talk about gender diversity in Nigeria, and it's the same women. Literally, some women sit on like 6-7 boards, and others of these shy, the seekers, as you call them, brilliant as they are, don't get put forward. And so I wonder what value. So it's almost like a box ticking exercise, which defeats the purpose of diversity. So I really do identify with what you've just said.
I 100% agree with what Peju just said regarding looking at other, when we think about diversity, it's not just in terms of gender, in terms of ethnicity, socioeconomic background, as well as cognitive people with different cognitive abilities or neurodiversity. And I'm thinking of people with autism or ADHD. And we know autistic people, for example, are innovators, they're problem solvers. And we also, when we prepare a more inclusive system, these are also people we have to bring into the conversation and to think of.
Totally agree on that, Ghina. And while we are at it, Peju, I'd like to kind of share a result from a Harvard Business Review study from 2019, which suggested that successful women need two networks, unlike successful men. And very interestingly, the study was based on the Harvard MBA class. And they observed that, yes, having high centrality and having the right networks is a key to success. But for female leaders, they also need an inner circle of female contacts. And we have talked about the inner circle earlier on in the conversation. Did you have that inner circle in your career? And how can females in the workplace strengthen their visibility, their collective voice, and representation?
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Interestingly, as I said, I learned I learned a lot of lessons. I would say almost too late in my career, and I'm keen that other people don't make the same mistakes. And so it took me a long time to understand the power of networking and understand the power of having support groups. So I used to think that as long as I was working very hard, and as long as I was, professional and, producing excellent results, that I would progress. And it pretty much worked until I got to the CEO level. And then all of a sudden that isn't enough. And because you're not really part of the old boys network, try as you might, I then realized the power of having female networks. And so I'm using those much more intentionally than I ever did early in my career, and encouraging people who are starting out to make this a very strong part of their career toolkits. And so I totally agree that apart from your normal network of industry circles, I am now a member of quite a number of female circles, formal and informal, and I find them important from a career perspective, but much more important just from a support perspective, just because women tend to live full lives, or many women tend to live full lives, and just having people who can understand the many balls being juggled is always a blessing. And so I totally agree. I agree on the importance of visibility. Again, like I used to be the shy retiring violets who just work very hard. I would do things differently if I could start afresh. I would be much more visible from the very beginning, and visible not just within my industry, but also across. So not just in industry circles, but across different types of circles. And I'm working on it, by the way. I am still working on it. It's never too late. I'm working on it.
That is the inspiring part. And, as you mentioned that previously, a lot of your mentors were men. Perhaps given your journey is spanning across the course of 30 years, perhaps when you started off, those options weren't very much available. And now that you see it, even though you're at the top of the ladder, the fact that you're, taking all those opportunities and passing it on down to other female networks is super cool. And
yes, you are. When I was starting out, it wasn't discussed. It wasn't a thing. Perhaps there was a little bit of it going on, but it really wasn't. So I think in that sense, like Gina said, it's still not enough. We can't. It shouldn't even be a debate if women are close to half of the population, but unfortunately it is. So as much progress as we think we've made, it's still not enough. It really isn't enough.
it isn't. And I think there is so much to be done to just educate females and women leaders and women colleagues to work together, and the importance of those support networks. Because sometimes when you are in a minority and you're juggling with so many, with so many roles, with so many hats, it's like you need that support the fact just to know that somebody is in the same boat gives you so much comfort, and how they're handling it. Or if somebody just says, it's okay, this happens and this is how you can tackle it, that really helps. And while we talk about that, Gina, what is your recommendation on bringing male allies on board?
Sorry, what do you mean by bringing man allies into the,
just like, you have your old boys club. How do you kind of convince this members of these club that they need to make way for females to step in and women leaders to come in? And it's not just about football and golf and just those topics, because sometimes even in some of the organizations I've been, it's very hard to even be part of the conversation because it's so different.
It starts with education, the way we raise our boys. It starts by extending this conversation. One thing that I really don't like about the events that promote, gender equality, the role of women, is that mostly you see in the audience, you mostly see women in these rooms. So I think we need to see more men in the room. We need to engage them in the conversation rather than just blame them for how the system is working. So it's a conversation, and partly it's education as well. And once they kind of take on this responsibility of, pushing forward with this equality agenda, I think there are a couple of things men allies are able to do to help in the workplace and in society and everywhere. One is to advocate, to call out inequality when you see it, to refuse injustice, whether it's in entrepreneurship, investing in women businesses, whether it's in academia, what kind of funding, what kind of projects are being funded, or scientific grants, promotions in the workplace, etc. So advocate. The second one I would say is to amplify. This is a concept that I really, really like. Amplify the voices of minorities. I amplify the voices of women rather than, speaking over them. And I think there is a power in the collective voices, in the voice of the collective. And this is something you mentioned at the beginning, the power of communities powering through with this movement towards more equal workplaces and more equal societies. So advocate, amplify. And I think probably I would also choose, to keep with to make it the AAA, probably choose to acknowledge their successes, acknowledge their role, the women's role and the role of minorities, give them credit where credit is due, give elbow room, sharing the responsibilities, whether in the workplace again or at home. These are things I think if you want, as men, these are things that could help. With taking this agenda forward.
So amplify, advocate, and acknowledge this.
Yes, 3 times.
3 A's are here.
Triple A.
One of the articles that was published in BBC and was featuring a research, this article was published in July 2020. It had a wonderful line that I'd love to share. It says, every single male CEO who looks around his boardroom table to see 9 out of 10 male faces staring back at him needs to ask himself what he's doing to make his business one which his daughter or granddaughter can get on. And it's by Wanda Murray, who chairs the board at 5250 company. So very thoughtful. And that's what I share with my male colleagues, that I tell them that this podcast should be your daughter's lullaby and your son's lullaby, because, you need to share these conversations around.
Absolutely.
Alrighty, so we will now, be moving towards the end of this wonderful dialogue, and we'll ask some up close and personal questions to kind of nicely end it. It's a rocky road to lead the way, to shatter glass ceilings, and women leaders are expected to be queen bees and superwomen for that matter. What is your personal mantra? How has your journey impacted you and your vulnerabilities, really, Peju? And before I get on to you guys, I think one thing that I really admire about both of you is when I look at you, I don't feel that you're any less feminist than what you should be. I mean, it's not like you're trying to fit into a male-dominated world, changing your persona, becoming somebody different. So that is something that I find really inspiring, and I really look up to female leaders who are actually able to, shine out with their feminism and be super innovative about it. So yeah, Peju, we like to hear your thoughts.
I love that comment. I think it goes back to what Gina said about the stiletto. I can't remember the exact comment, but I thought it was apt. So being successful doesn't necessarily mean we need to try to conform, try so hard to conform that we forget who we really are. And I must say, there's this stereotype about women, women bosses, the queen bee, women putting down other women, women not getting on with other women, women bosses. The stereotype is that, this is a boss from hell. If there's anything I do, it's to break that stereotype and actually ensure that and I have wonderful relationships with the women that I work with. So I think it's a stereotype, and if there's one thing I do, it is to consciously break that myth. It is not so. When women can collaborate, women can cooperate, women can work well and do work well together. And perhaps it comes from, my one of my mantras is to treat others as I would like to be treated. And so, if I have been in a position where, for the woman who's multitasking, I have been in positions where I've had to do things, put work a bit on hold to take care of, of business. I don't see why, I should begrudge other women or other men who have to do the same. So I have tried to stay true to myself, and it's because, I would like to treat others as I would like to be treated. I do think, though, I have 4 children, and I love the times that we're in. And I love, in my country, working from home and flexible working was never really a reality. We've blown that out of the window and absolutely shown that it's possible to work effectively from home. And I think this is going to be so liberating for so many women, not just women, but it's going to be so liberating. And because I do feel that I missed out on family time. I feel very strongly that I missed out on family time. My kids are all grown up now. And kids grow so fast. You just wonder where all the time went. I do feel I missed out on special friendships. I feel that as I progressed in my career, I became more and more odd person in my circle of friends. Many of them began to drop out. And I was this sort of, and it's people sometimes ascribe a persona on you that you are not. They just assume that because you're, a CEO with a big corner office or whatever, that you must be. These are people I've known them all my lives, and all of a sudden they assume that I have suddenly become a monster, and I'm like, oh, where does that come from? So we also have to deal with people's perceptions of what the successful career woman is, and I love, my build. I'm petite. In fact, I love that feeling of surprise when, very often I go to a meeting and they say, right, who's the CEO? And you see them looking around the room, look everywhere but in my direction. And finally there's a silence, and a long embarrassed silence. And they say, oh, it's her. Very funny. I love it. So I laugh. I laugh a lot at myself. I have 3 daughters, as I said. And it's most important to me that I'm a strong role model for them, and a strong role model for them and for their friends. And so I think as long as I can see, and children do what you do, they don't do what you say. And so I very much watch their choices, and use that often as a guide. And one thing I must say is that I think we also need to shake off our definitions of what is a successful female leader. As far as I'm concerned, you don't have to be a CEO in the C-suite to be a successful female leader. You could be an athlete, you could be a housewife, you could be whatever. As long as your ambitions and aspirations are not being inhibited by forces outside of yourself or by self-imposed barriers and limitations. So I don't necessarily think that because somebody opted to have a better balance of work and life or family and career means that they're less successful than I am. It depends on what measure you're using.
That's a very, very thoughtful statement, Peju. And my mom's a working mom as well. And her thoughts resonate totally with you. She's a doctor. And while we were young, she did not want to pursue a full-time career. So she went part-time. And for her, that was success. And then later on, she did full-time. And when we went to university, she did full-time. And I understand where you come from, and I feel you. And I think the fact that, treat others as you want to be treated is something which is very well known, but I think we need a reminder of that constantly. Gina?
Yes. What I want to say first is that I want to say thank you, Peju, for being such a wonderful, wonderful person, for your humility, for your authenticity, and how true to yourself you are, and how supportive you are for other women. And it pains me, but I must say that not everybody is like that. Not every woman is supportive of other women. And I love this in you. And I'm very privileged and happy that I got to know you and work with you. The second thing I want to say is that Sara, you mentioned your mother, and this reminded me as well. I've had a wonderful role model growing up as well, my own mom. My mom she's now a retired school teacher, but, for me growing up, she was always a school teacher, very, very hardworking school teacher. And she raised us while doing a full-time job that is very, very time demanding and energy demanding. And you won't believe this, but she actually never took a day off. She never took a day off. Ill or, she only took the days off when it was a holiday at school or for the summer break. But she was that hardworking, and she raised us with my father to be hardworking and, among other things. She also brought us to be lovers of books, my siblings and I. Something you said, Peju, that deeply, deeply resonated with me is, one, how you laugh it off when you face these, misconceptions or these discriminations. I love this shock factor about you. And I love more is how you embrace it as a weapon. I love this, you catch people off guard. I love this. And I've also, growing up and, navigating my way through my career, I've also learned that sometimes we need to laugh it off. I've learned to become a Teflon woman. Negativity doesn't stick on me. I just have to, let it slide and move on with my mission, with my passion, and with my dreams. So this is something that also resonated with me. Another brilliant thing you said is shaking off stereotypes. And this is something I deeply, deeply believe in. And, with Enterprise Women, the entrepreneurship program that I lead at Cambridge Judge Business School, one idea is that I embrace deeply and I work on all the time is how we can help women embrace their true self, their authenticity has so much power in it. And instead of trying to fit, like you said, embrace this. Embrace your own leadership style, throw away that norm, that social norm that a leader has to be a loud superstar. And it doesn't have to be. As long as you believe that what you bring to the table is unique, is valid and worthy, that's all you need. You need this as a mantra, and then you will build the resilience to find adversaries who are trying to prove otherwise. Inhibitions is another thing. I mean, sometimes our worst enemies are us in our minds, and letting go of these inhibitions and being ourselves. And one thing I'd like to share with your listeners, Sara, today is, there are ways that help us, like concrete ways that help us let go of these inhibitions. I, for example, practice physical theater, and it helped me a lot as a public speaker, as a facilitator, as a chairperson, as a person who is often visible speaking about something or another. It helped me a lot, removing these blockages, whether in our body language or in our minds, and letting go sometimes, and letting, opening a little door where our creativity can come in. And now I very quickly come back to your original question about, you mentioned shattering glass ceilings. So I have my own experience. In my own experience, I've shattered a glass ceiling when I decided to get my PhD in Lebanon that never offered a degree in a PhD in astrophysics before. I sort of shattered that glass ceiling because nobody had done it before. No man, no woman had done it before. But what I think is that we need to stop using the term of glass ceilings because it's inhibitive in a way. Because to be honest with you, in hindsight, it could be seen as a glass ceiling, but when I was in the thick of it, I did not see a ceiling. I just grew into this self that was, emerging out of me. I was forging this path for myself, and I didn't see there was a ceiling and didn't imagine there was a lid on me. And if we just let go of this notion, the sky is the limit. And this has impacted me in my future. You asked about my mantra. Something I keep repeating to myself is I don't have a dream, I have a plan. And this takes a lot of courage. It's easy to say, but it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of jumping out of my comfort zone because, if you want your future in a certain way, you have to plan it and you have to design it with your own hands. And it's very easy. I find that it's very easy with everything that's going on to drift in one's mission. And it's never a straight line. It never is. But as long as you have that North Star in sight, you can always find a way to make your dream come true.
These are wonderful parting thoughts, and I felt like I could listen to this forever, Ghina and Peju both. And thank you very much. And you both are absolutely inspiring in your own unique way, and that's where the treasure lies, because the treasure lies in uniqueness and in how you embrace your uniqueness and how you kind of, let go of certain things and laugh it off, and choose your battles for that matter. I'm going to be like a strong follower of your journey and both of your journeys. And I hope and I wish that more women can be inspired by your lovely journey.
It's time to design, create, and build an inclusive club. If you enjoyed this dialogue, please do share this podcast episode as a care gift with your friends, family, and wider network. Do leave us some feedback in the comments section below and follow us on Instagram at The Winning Side Podcast. Till then, ciao ciao.